China is one of the oldest civilizations still in existence, and its long-term success can be attributed to its zealous pursuit of social harmony. We cover the harshest of these penalties in today's video. Strangely, Confucius's teachings inspire China to create abhorrent and soul-crushing punishments that could make even the coldest criminals weep. Chinese Penal Code. Another name for this is the Five Punishment System. That indicates that China had only 5 fundamental categories of penalties, which were applied to offences according to their seriousness. Though the originator of these 5 punishments is unknown, Chinese tales attribute the notion to a famous warrior by the name of Qiyu. Although his precise clan is unknown, many believe he belonged to the Hmong or one of its allies, such as the Sun Miao or the Nine Li. 5 punishments were instituted by the Xia dynasty because they were believed to be related to Qiyu, a mythical king who appears in Chinese tales. The 5 penalties were mostly employed to mark criminals prior to the Qin dynasty. Criminals who committed pickpocketing and small-time theft were tattooed as a permanent reminder of their shame and misfortune. Amputation was the standard procedure for serious theft and pillage. The most frequent form of this punishment was having the nose cut off. Amputation was a factor in the 3rd and 4th punishments as well. You could lose one or both feet, or if your crime was horrible enough, you could be castrated as a result. Finally, only the most serious crimes were punished with death. Woman was subject to a different set of 5 penalties under this code. Again, the reason for a distinct set for women is not fully understood today, but it may be related to China's patriarchal society, where women were thought to be less tolerant than men and were not always held accountable for their misdeeds. The 5 punishments for women were being made to grind grain, having their fingers pinched between sticks, being beaten with wooden sticks, being made to commit suicide, or in the most severe circumstances, being placed in solitary confinement and sequestration. Evolving the law. The Xuhuangdi established autocratic authority as the first emperor of the Qin dynasty in 221 BC, which led to the creation of the first imperial legal codes of a centralized Chinese state. Legalism, a school of thought that held that people were inherently bad, dominated Qin China. In accordance with this theory, regulations needed to be straightforward, merciless, and effective in order to produce a happy society where the weak were safe. Legalism's forefather advocated for harsh regulations and suggested that the monarch alone should hold the power, exercising it like lightning or thunder. He supported using torture and forced labor equally as punishment and urged the judge to use the death penalty if necessary. As a result of the Qin dynasty's adherence to such repressive policies, they were overthrown by the Huns in 206 BC. At this time, Confucianism was incorporated into China's revised constitution and penal code. However, there were still enough remnants of legalism in the system to maintain the harsh punishments in place. The 5 punishment system underwent alterations after the Qin dynasty established a legalistic penal code. Later, the Han dynasty institutionalized Confucianism. The 5 punishments were replaced in the imperial era by death by strangulation, slicing, or decapitation depending on the severity of a horrifying crime, bamboo lashes to the buttocks for minor offenses, stick lashes to the back, buttocks and legs for petty offences committed repeatedly, 1 to 3 years of prison time for standard offences. There were several degrees of each penalty. For instance, the number of hits that might be inflicted to a prisoner who was ordered to be beaten with a light stick could range from 1 to 5. Therefore, a convict might endure 10 to 50 beatings and a 1 to 3 year sentence to prison. Even exile had its limitations. Thus, the farther the offender travelled, the more serious the crime. A fast decapitation was thought to be a harsher form of execution than being strangled. This may sound odd considering that strangling is a slower and more agonizing method of passing away. However, their ultimate form of execution consisted solely of slowly killing people cut after cut. This was China's most terrifying form of punishment and torture. The 1,000 cuts. The 5 punishments changed into increasingly gruesome forms of punishment during the 10th century. Ling Qi, also known as death by 1,000 cuts, was employed in China for the most severe offences, known as the 10 Abominations, and could only be sentenced by the emperor's order. Treason, parricide, spouse murder, insurrection, and witchcraft were among the 10 abominations. Ling Chi, like other penalties, had a range of degrees of punishment depending on how serious the crime was. In order to maximize anguish while maintaining the function of the critical organs, this horrible punishment began with the flailing of portions of skin, muscles, and finally the removal of body parts. Ling Chi typically involved 8 slices to the body, but it may also involve up to 120 slices. Yes, it seems misleading to refer to the sentence as death by 1,000 cuts, but the word 1,000 has a beautiful ring to it. The torturer would begin by slicing the victim's face, then move on to the hands, feet, chest, and stomach before striking the victim's heart or decapitating them. Ling Chi has been compared by Western writers who have personally experienced it as soul-devouring torment. It was intended to obliterate the offender's spiritual future so that it would not be recognizable in the afterlife. Effectiveness of the punishments. Judges and magistrates received the utmost respect and authority in the ancient Chinese judicial system. The accused and the witnesses would both be on their knees before the official during the entire process. Even in court, the accused was plagued by the fear of being tortured. Even though they were aware that occasionally an innocent person who had been wrongfully convicted and tortured would give in and confess to a crime despite being innocent, the ancient Chinese authorities maintained complete faith in this terrible and unjust system of justice. However, they argued that because it quickly resolved cases, torture was a highly effective technique of bringing criminals to justice. Torture would be employed from the beginning and would become a crucial component of the investigations because criminal cases might be solved simply by the confessions of the accused. The result of any trial in ancient and imperial China was completely based on the most crucial piece of evidence, the testimony of the accused. Without a confession, the accused could not be found guilty in accordance with Chinese Penal Code. Think again if you believe this to be the ideal way around their judicial system. Yes, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that flew in the face of the law, one person might continue to deny all charges and escape punishment. But because the case depended on it, it also meant that the government could employ any technique to get a confession from them. In ancient Chinese courts, it was customary to tie defendants and witnesses by their arms around a pole throughout the trial. To prevent the witnesses and the accused from daring to lie in their testimony, the guard would coil up the poles and twist their arms. Witnesses were naturally reluctant to come forward because of the harsh treatment. However, if they were called, they would be forced into the courtroom against their will. The accused and unwilling witnesses were frequently held in a kang, which is a flat wooden frame that's locked over a person's neck. The prisoner would either carry the flat-board restraint on their shoulders or use it as the top lid of a tiny wooden cage so that their feet wouldn't quite touch the ground. The prisoner could be strangled as a result of this treatment's intense pressure on their neck. The flat board of the kang was frequently too small, preventing the prisoner's hands from reaching his mouth or preventing him from lying down, which made it necessary for the prisoner to get help in order to eat or drink. Until the hearing's conclusion or longer if they were found guilty, the accused would have to wear the kang constantly. Authorities will nevertheless force the suspect to wear the kang around their neck in public as a sign of humiliation, even if they are not put in prison. The neck tower was one marginally less cruel means of execution. The prisoner was placed in a kang cage with nothing but stones for him to stand on. In order to prevent the poor prisoner from dying of strangulation slowly and horribly, 1 or 2 stones are removed daily. That's it for today's video. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment on what video you want to watch next. And if you've enjoyed the video, make sure to watch this video to learn more about the worst ancient Egyptian punishment methods.